The Isaiah Factor Uncensored starts right now.
Heavy breathing, shaking, and even collapsing in court. Kyle Rittenhouse reacted outwardly in court as he hears a judge read the verdict that he was found not guilty on all 5 counts by even hugging one of his attorneys. He faced 2 homicide, 1 attempted homicide, and 2 endangerment charges. And that's it. There is no appeal process for this. Welcome to The Factor Uncensored. The decision doesn't come without scrutiny. Many critics calling this gross failure of the criminal justice system, another form of white privilege in this country. We talked to our panel about it tonight. And our guests are here tonight on The Factor Uncensored to talk about the verdict in the Kyle Rittenhouse case. Are you guys surprised? Charles Adams, are you surprised that the jury came back not guilty on all 4 charges?
I wasn't surprised by the not guilty. I expected after the second day there to be a hung jury, but Rittenhouse, the judge gave Rittenhouse the instruction. I think the battleground was going to be whether or not he was entitled to a self-defense instruction on the initial charge, the shooting of Joseph Rosenbaum, because he was just an unarmed aggressor running towards them. And the focus of the defense attorneys was purely that alleged lunge or grab at the gun. And it was characterized by a great many as a fight for the firearm, but the testimony doesn't hold that up. I think once he got the self-defense instruction, and the judge clearly wore his position on his sleeve throughout the trial, which signals to the jury a direction, which I thought was a bit inappropriate and surprising because typically judges are in favor of the prosecution of the state. But when you have someone like Colin Kaepernick is demanding that we abolish the system now and calling Rittenhouse a white supremacist, there was no evidence to suggest that he was a white supremacist at all, right? And it's something that's reverberated around the nation. He was a poorly parented 17-year-old kid who went out with a bunch of other people who were frustrated at the fact that Kenosha the PD failed to respond to the rioting, not protesting, but rioting and looting and arson, and then took matters in their own hand. What concerns me here is that this is going to send a message to so many people that it is okay to shoot an unarmed man or an unarmed person that is aggressive towards you. And in most states, including Wisconsin, it's not supposed to be. But this isn't a thing to call to abolish the system. This isn't the end of the world. This is what we want in America. We want the O.J. Simpsons and the Rittenhouses to go free when the state fails to make their case. The burden, beyond a reasonable doubt, is supposed to ensure that guilty people go free to ensure we don't convict innocent people. So I'm not shocked by the verdict. I'm not shocked by any of this. What concerns me the most is the path forward for this very fractured country. And of course, all the people that are online celebrating murder is a bit shocking, but that is 2021 America.
All right, Justin, was this verdict just and fair?
I thought it was fair. I really agree with a lot of what Charles had to say. I'd really add to it. I thought the prosecution lost the case. Once the guy who was shot in the bicep, I forgot his name, but when he was on the stand and he said it was correct that he pointed his gun first. I thought that's when the whole thing fell apart for the prosecution. And when Charles mentions the judge really kind of interjected, let's say that, it's because, at least from my seat, it seemed like the defense attorneys seemed to be asleep at the wheel sometimes, that they couldn't even stand up for basic constitutional rights when the prosecution was overstepping. And I really couldn't get over the prosecutor is wearing Star Wars lapels, little buttons, pins on his buttons, like the Millennium Falcon. I thought he lost a lot of credibility. I know that's ticky-tack. I know that, but I thought the whole thing was bizarre.
All right, Oliver Brown, let's hear from you.
Yeah, I think Charles put it best. Sometimes the system, has to let go of guilty people by holding the prosecutor accountable to its standard. However, in this instance, I watch this trial day in, day out. I'm more concerned how it took so long for them to even come to this conclusion, because as I watch that, about day 3, 4, 5. I was like, there's no way that you can convict this guy. There was some issues with the media, how it presented this man in one light. And as it went to trial, it was totally opposite of what the media narrative was. So I believe that the juror got it correct. Now, as to the other point that, Mr. Adams was making about the fractionation, this is going to be concerning because there's going to be future protests and rioting. And the question is now, what fool is going to be emboldened to go out there and pick a fight and try this type of stuff again? And that's where I think I'm more concerned about. The juror did the right thing. Everyone running around saying, oh, a murderer got free. Did he commit homicide? Technically, yes, because he killed someone. But was it justified homicide? And that's what the jury came in and said that it was absolutely justified. And we have to stop this listening to the media and rush to judgment on every defendant. We need to say, okay, the state says this has happened. Now let's hold them to their standard and see if they can actually prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt. And the prosecutors did a terrible job in this case by not proving much of anything. At one point, I knew that they were losing the case when you were asking simple questions such as, do you play first-person shooter games? What relevance does that have to what was happening that night? It has none. And so therefore, I believe that the jury got it right in this instance.
Charles, you're a realist and you know how people in this country, especially African Americans or blacks, will look at this. Here, they're saying, hey, here's a white kid who got off after shooting someone. Is it that simple? And will this mean more problems down the road with race relations from your perspective?
I don't think anything is simple. I think there's a tremendous amount of nuance. I would disagree with the criticism of defense counsel. Defense counsel was lawyering, and they were focused tremendously on the issue of the lunge or grab at the gun, because that was the key issue. Because if the first shooting was legal, then the rest would follow suit. So I would disagree that they did a bad job. And also, if you watched it, when Kyle Rittenhouse was testifying, when he was asked difficult questions by the prosecutor, he would not answer, which a good attorney would object non-responsive and try to box him in. The prosecution was horrible. But I do think the defense counsel did a very good job getting a not guilty where there was video of his client shooting and killing an unarmed man. Now, there's been a lot of stuff on conservative media space about the lapel pins, and I don't think any of that's relevant. The prosecution did a horrible job, and they weren't prepared, and they asked questions like Mr. Brown said that they didn't need the answer to. But no, Isaiah, to your point, I don't want, and I want to express this every time I'm on TV, on a radio, the lesson cannot be to young Americans that it is okay to take a gun out and shoot down and kill someone who is unarmed and being aggressive to you, because that's not the law. And that's why that gun grab was so important during the testimony. And we just don't want that America. And of course, there are many people that are feeling like this is an example of white privilege, or this is an example or socioeconomic privilege. But man, at some point, we have to have our government step in and say, hey, protest is protest, and it is allowed and protected by the First Amendment, but rioting and looting is not, and we're going to aggressively respond to that. And then on the other end, we need people saying, hey, what the hell was wrong with this mother that she allowed her 17-year-old child to go play Call of Duty in real life? Right? So, I mean, he is not a hero. He is a poorly parented child. And anyone that thinks he's a hero and not a poorly parented child the word is idiot, because that child should have never been there in that circumstance. But the citizens should have never been there. They've never should have had things being burnt and set aflame and looted without any government response. There was a lot of fault and culpability across the board, and it's just a tragic situation, and America has to step forward. We have to fix the policing paradigm, but we have to stop tolerating rioting and looting, and damn it, let's focus on our children just a bit more.
And we do not stop there. We examine the conversation about how much bad parenting played a role in this case. We'll pick back up after the break with our panel. Stay with us here on The Factor Uncensored tonight. And welcome back to The Factor Uncensored. Kyle Rittenhouse was found not guilty on all charges he faced after shooting 3 people in Kenosha, Wisconsin, killing 2 of them. Now, our panel debates whether his mother should take some blame in all of this.
And Justin, you had some concerns about when we talked about parenting. Your concern about that is what?
Well, I think there are a bunch of issues. I feel like we're on the radio show here. Okay, go back to one previous point before the parroting. I think if the trial went the other way and he was convicted, what would that say about our rights to defend ourselves? That's what the scariest part about this whole thing would be. And I think there was a real concocted effort here to try to take away that right. As we've seen, so many other rights have been stripped from us in the last 18 months. I think this is just another notch to try to take away from the Constitution and nullify it, because we've seen so much of it already. But
where do you see in the Constitution a right to shoot an unarmed man?
Come on.
Now, why are you making stuff up? Where do you see a right to shoot an unarmed man in the Constitution?
No, you have a right
Point me to the amendment.
Yourself. You know what? That guy died doing the same thing he always did the rest of his life, chasing little kids. That's how.
Oh yeah, the guy Joseph Rosenbaum was a monster. He's a monster. But you don't. There's nowhere. There's no protected right to shoot unarmed people.
You have a right to defend yourself. That is paramount in our country, and that's what's so important, that we must keep it. And we must not lose our Constitution. But that's why the prosecution went so hard at it.
The bigger issue that's being overlooked here is that this child, and Mr. Adams said it the best. It's like, well, why did a parent allow a child to drive, 20 miles over with a loaded gun and play, first defender of the?
Come on,
that's what he was doing.
And it's wrong.
Would you let your 17-year-old kid go out there with a gun?
First off,
would you let your 17-year-old kid go out there with a gun?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure. But it's not like he lives so far away. It was horrible parenting.
His mother should be ashamed. She put himself in that position. The city of Kenosha should be ashamed. They put small businessmen in the position where they had to get a militia of sorts together to protect their businesses.
You're absolutely
There was a lot of faults across the board. But to suggest his mother didn't do something idiotic is dishonest.
There you go, and this conversation is not over just yet. With so much finger pointing over what went wrong, our panel agrees on one thing, that the decision to have Rittenhouse testify was a good one. We wrap up after the break. Stay with us here on The Factor Uncensored. And welcome back to The Factor Uncensored. There is a lot of criticism surrounding the trial of Kyle Rittenhouse. We wrap up with our panel by asking if they thought it was a good idea that he testified on his own behalf. Here's what they had to say.
Oliver, let me ask you this. Was it a good idea, genius move to allow him to testify?
I really felt, yes, it was a good idea for him to testify, to put his story out there. I didn't think that he was the best on the stand, but I think the jurors gave him some leeway because of his youthfulness. They didn't hold him to a higher standard of a 35-year-old, because he's only like 18, 19 years old. So I don't think, he did that great, but I think it did enough, and clearly it did, because the jurors sided with him.
Charles, let's get your take on that. Having your client testify on their own behalf in a murder trial like that.
I think it's important. I've got a murder trial coming up in April that I anticipate, or March, I anticipate my client to testify. Same issue, self-defense. I think it is important, and I think he was unbelievably well prepared. Oliver, if you'll go back and look, every time he got confronted with a difficult question during cross-examination, he effectively shut it down himself, which is amazing for a kid his age, a young adult his age, to respond. And it just speaks to, again, how horrible Binger and his entire team was. I felt like there were times when I thought, well, maybe the prosecution's trying to throw this. Maybe they're trying to lose. And I don't believe that. But it was horrible, horrible lawyering by the state. I was embarrassed for them.
Justin, your take on Kyle testifying on his own behalf?
Honestly, I was surprised that he did it, but I'm glad he did. I thought he was very, very effective. But when he went up there, I kind of held my breath. I wanted to see fairness, no matter what it was. I didn't want to see. I think he's a young kid. I don't want to see a young kid get taken advantage of by a bunch of adults. And like Charles said, he very much held his own. So it worked out. Gamble, and it worked.
And Charles, when we take a look at some of the photos that came out of court, the coziness of Kyle next to the judge, people had issues about that. The throwing out of the gun charge. Your thoughts on those issues? Okay,
there's a lot of talk on social media about the gun charge and how it was unfair. The gun charge was actually inapplicable. The gun charge is based on the length of a barrel, and a short barrel firearm, a kid his age is not allowed to carry it. A long barrel he is. So that was just a mistaken charge on the behalf of the state, and the judge did the right thing tossing that out. But no, there was a lot of coziness. That was one thing where I felt like the defense attorneys did a horrible job. When I'm talking to my clients, I tell them, you are looking at going to prison. When you are in the courthouse, you look somber. You don't smile. You look sad because this is serious to you. And there was a tremendous amount of smiling and smirking on the behalf of Rittenhouse that suggested to me he did not take this as seriously as he should. The one bad thing I think he did on the stand was the fake crying. I didn't find that believable. But beyond that, again, I just think they did a really good job in response to the state doing a really bad job. And I think it reverberated throughout the media and to the jurors that the three guys that were shot were all, I believe, criminals. I think two of them were convicted felons. One of them was a pedophile. And I think that message reverberated. And I do think you saw the Independent posted a headline today that he shot 3 African-American men. And I think there are still a lot of people that still believe that this wasn't a young white man shooting 3 white men, that they believe that it was a race issue. And it just breaks my heart. I mean, and I'm not, this isn't hyperbole. I'm sad for where America is right now. I'm sad that we are at this point where people are giving a pulpit to argue for fracturing our society as opposed to recognizing that we are the seat of freedom in the world. And if America goes away, the world belongs to the authoritarian regime of China, where they are running genocide camps and liquidation camps and ethnic cleansing camps. And damn it, we are the best. And we have to start treating each other like we're the best and start fixing this country without bullets, without rioting, with actual solutions.
Right. Charles is absolutely right. And it seems like that this is
I tend to be.
I'm voting for Charles Adam for president.
We're out of time, guys, because Charles is right.
Always. Charles is always right.